Hey, the world's full of fantastic music. Each month, we explore an album of significance, its roots, how it makes us feel, and then banter about its influence and staying power. Join us on our journey as we dissect, discuss, and discover some of the world's greatest albums on The Sonic Collective.
Hello, everybody out there in Sonic Land. This is Alan for The Sonic Collective, and I am joined by Scott Gregory, Scott Coates, and Darren Scott. In this episode, we are reviewing Alice in Chains' album, Dirt, for our July 2022 pick. I'm just going to dive right in here and throw it over to Scott Coates to get his thoughts on this album.
Thanks, Alan. I was super pumped when you picked this one. I was well aware of Alice in Chains. I realized I knew a couple of their singles, but I'd never heard a whole album for them. And it also brought back memories of seeing them open for Van Halen on the For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge tour. I think that was a bad opening band fit, and the crowd was yelling at them. And I remember they didn't like them very much. And the lead singer was like yelling at people in the audience. I remember one guy's like, "You can suck my fucking cock, you blah, blah, blah." And it got pretty ugly. So that I remember seeing them there. I went into this thinking like, oh, great, this is going to be awesome. Like the good old days of grunge. And I just found it was kind of every song was slowly grinding forward, slowly, almost like a car shifting. And you know, I think if there was a few songs at this like lower mid pace tone and style, it would be fine. But there just wasn't enough kind of fast toe tapping, like kick ass songs mixed in there. I just found it all kind of slowly grinded along repetitively and depressingly. So I went from being really excited to unexcited. And I think the opening track, Them Bones, really is the album sound, and it just maintains that. Like there was Damn That River. I mean, it's kind of fun and upbeat, reminding me a little bit of Stone Temple Pilots, but actually probably Alice in Chains reminds me of Stone Temple Pilots on this song, because I think Alice in Chains were like one of the absolute first grind or grunge bands. I mean, Rooster and Wood, they'll make my playlist. Those two are solid songs, and I knew Wood and really well and Rooster a little bit. But they also have that grinding tempo, but they're catchy and they stand out. I mean, it got to Godsmack and I was just sort of like, what the fuck? But I'm sad to say I never actually made it through this album in one go. I tried so many times and I kept just having to turn it off at a point, usually around Junkhead. I just couldn't find a situation where it was grooving with me. Like errands around the house, nope. Cooking, nope. I tried it running and biking a couple times, and I just reach a point where I'm like, God damn, this is just slow, and I found myself feeling depressed. So I don't know. I think the album's 15 to 20 minutes long. I always go on about that, but it's just shy of an hour, and they're kind of a one-trick pony sound-wise. That said, I mean, this is definitely the sound of the start of the grunge movement. I remember, I think, going to the Republic and hearing a few of these songs. I remember ending up at a couple parties that weren't my scene in like dark rooms and this sort of grinding on in the background. This really is an album to me to lament life a little bit, lay on a dirty couch, get super baked, and just kind of be unhappy. It's not really my thing. And I was surprised because I thought I was getting into this hard rock album that I was really going to dig. But I just found that slow, monotonous, grinding pace just too repetitive and frankly, a bit depressing. So anyway, there's my take on it. Who do you want to go next, Alan?
Thanks, Scott. Let's throw it over to Darren.
Sure. Yeah. I am a big fan of the grunge era, and I was with Scott, actually. I was thinking like, yeah, this will be fun. And I may even mentioned it before, but I didn't really get into Alice in Chains too much. At the time, I remember them coming out, and I just remember, man, this is like dark and bleak, and I just struggled with it, which is funny because I'm over the top love Nirvana, and there's actually a lot of songs that could easily be Nirvana songs in there. You could interchange them. So it's weird that I was struggling with the bleakness, but I agree with Scott. I did get through it several times, but I did find that it does have some kind of hiccups through it, let's say, where it's just like, okay, some songs are all right, and then it just kind of gets, I don't know, off track or something like that. Now, this is a 4-time multi-platinum album, 4 million copies and counting. And that's just in the United States. I don't know what the exact sales are, but it's crazy big. Like, it's considered one of the greatest metal / alt rock albums of all time. Highly recommended to listen to. And at the end of this, I think I'm going to come back there because it is good. I mean, it was released in September of 92. Scott mentioned it is almost an hour long, 57 minutes. And Layne Staley on vocals, Jerry Cantrell on the guitar, Mike Starr on bass, and Sean Kinney on drums. This was only their second album, and the last time all four would actually be together. Mike Starr was kicked out shortly after this album because apparently heroin is bad. That's actually, you can't see this in this podcast, but I've named my name Heroin is Bad because it took both the lives of Layne Staley and Mike Starr. Layne Staley died in 2002 of a serious drug overdose, and the awful thing, and maybe some of you read this too, they didn't find him for 2 weeks. So imagine being that big of a star and you die basically alone and nobody even finds you for 2 weeks. So that's a pretty sad story about drugs. I mean, he was struggling during this album recording with heroin and had a pretty rough life. So this is maybe an album best listened to on heroin. No, we are not encouraging heroin use at all. It's bad, as you can see. Anyway, really album-wise and musically, it is good in a lot of ways. And I'll point out a few things that I really noticed. And the one was, everybody really knows Layne Staley for his dark kind of voice and lyrics. And though not maybe contributing as much on the lyrics, and I hope some caught this, but really the harmonies with guitarist Jerry Cantrell are, I think, what actually makes the vocals in this very interesting. It's not on every song, but a lot. And if you really listen, it's not just Layne Staley double tracked. It's actually a harmony with Jerry Cantrell. And it's actually done really well and effective, mind you, albeit quite dark. It comes out like that. It is a depressing album. I mean, I kind of said, I think this is an album that I think is almost best if you pick out a few songs and put them on like grunge or rock of the 90s and have a nice mix going through, fine. But it is a hard one to get through unless you're kind of like emo goth and you're just in, a down place and you just want to like veg out in the down low or be down. I don't know. That's not really me personally, even though I like a lot of those kind of grunge era bands. Another thing I noticed musically too is that I would say a lot of the songs, especially some of the 5 singles, the singles were Wood, Them Bones, Angry Chair, Rooster, and Down a Hole. Those songs especially, I find they're really driving and pounding. And what I noticed about that was a lot of times you get the rhythm sections, which is the bass and the drums that are kind of hitting at the same time, and you get that rhythm and beat. But I really noticed, especially in the singles, that Cantrell, his guitar is also hitting on the beat. Whereas a lot of times, if you even think like a jazz music, the guitar could be all over the place, not necessarily an exact sync and on the exact tempo. It could have a different time pattern than the actual drums and bass are kind of dictating. Whereas I found in this, and it came out kind of cool where it would be really driving, like he's hitting on that. So you're really getting the bass, the guitar, and the drums all hitting at the same time. And of course, with Layne Staley and Cantrell's kind of harmonies, it just really kind of hits nicely, even though the songs are a bit depressing. I really like that. This album again, something popped in my head and I'm like, it's kind of like a really good movie or TV villain. Like you watch a show and you're like, God, I fucking hate that character, whoever it is, like a villainess, you just hate it. And then you realize like, wow, that person's a really good actor because I legitimately hate them. I think that this album almost suffers from that. I think they did such a good job of Layne Staley's lyrics and that downness of heroin addiction and some really troubling times and coming out of the 80s and the Reagan era in the States. I think we're going to see that now again after coming out of the Trump era and how divisive the world is. I think we're going to see some really down punk and alternative and metal bands come out that will really have a new sound like this. So it was a really new sound. So I found like that villain thing. It's just like, I think it worked in its way. It was supposed to be super down and low, and hell yeah, it is. Like it nailed it. So I'll give it credit because I think that's what they were going for and they did it. Yeah, and one more. The song Rooster, I mean, one of the most popular songs, probably one of my favorites. I think I like Angry Chair better personally, but Rooster is really good. And interesting story about that, it's Jerry Cantrell's father was in Vietnam, and he wrote that song about him. But apparently his dad would never talk about Vietnam. He literally just shut himself down, but came back a bit of a broken man. So a lot of that, he just wrote trying to guess what was going on in his father's head. And a lot of it was about really coming back from Vietnam and how none of them were really treated to a hero's welcome. Ooh, that's like a lyric from the song 19. But yeah, I mean, these soldiers came back and they were basically shunned and just be like, yeah, you lost the war, you suck. And I mean, here they were going through PTSD, which when he wasn't even known, they're like, suck it up, buttercup, after seeing their buddies' heads get blown off and things like that. So I really like the story with that song and how that came about. I think that song is brilliant. And again, yeah, great. So anyway, I've kind of rambled on a little bit. Let's pass it over to Scott Gregory and get your takes on a little bit of this album.
Yeah, you guys touched on a couple things that really resonated with me as well. I always like seeing what the next songs are that Spotify throws at me when I'm done an album. And actually, Wicked Garden by Stone Temple Pilots was the next song on the track, right? So they heavily reminded me of that era as well. And that is by Stone Temple Pilots, not Chris Isaac. Completely different songs, different sound. What I liked... I knew this was in my wheelhouse and that I liked the era, but, when I went and looked up the album real quick on Wikipedia, there was an entry that was like, during June and August of 93, Alice in Chains joined Primus, Tool, Rage Against the Machine, and Babes in Toyland at Lollapalooza. And I'm like, oh my God, that would be like the dream concert for me to ever go to, right? So I was coming in pretty charged to this album already. And I don't think I'll run too long with this one since it's really easier to praise than critique. I'm a 40-something Gen Xer who struggled with early loss while trying to maintain a stoic sense of everything's okay to everyone around me. So this is my album. When you're talking like, let's go for the Downer Fest, I was like, hell yeah, let's lean right into this one, right? And apparently not all of that is resolved because I really enjoyed this album still to this day. Jar of Flies is really where I entered the Alice in Chains world. It just absolutely blew up my music listening. Them Bones and Rooster, were on my radar prior to that album dropping, but it was really interesting for me to go back and actually listen to the full album because I never had before. And the signature sound was already in place. Lane Staley's voice, Jerry Cantrell's guitar work. They're both worthy of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and it will continue to be a crime against music until they are inducted. I don't and have never used hard drugs, which is a major theme on this album. But, I did go through periods of escapism in different ways, trying to get through some rough times in my teens and early 20s. And the lyrics on this album really spoke to me. I almost wish I would have heard them. Well, maybe I shouldn't have heard them back then because that might have been a spiral. But I was surprised to read later that the band had issues with fans thinking that this album was an endorsement of drug use. To me, it was clearly an acknowledgement by the band. If you listen through to the whole thing instead of just picking out individual songs, that they were acknowledging the path that they chose, but not that it was the right or best choice. It was dealing with the poison and then dealing with the cure. And they were trying to decide which was worse. What they were trying to escape were eventually the drug use. And as you guys said, the drug use eventually is what got them. So despite being a very well produced album, with just great sound that fits in with that grunge scene, I just really liked the lyrics on this. I think the themes that it tackled pushed this album over the top, even over the instrumentation on it. Considering Jar of Flies comes out as an acoustic EP very soon afterwards, and it still debuts to number one, I'm pretty confident that, their lyrics across albums is really what's drawing people to this. Mileage may vary for different people, but on the tracks, looking at the major themes, of course, I love the Rooster. Darren, you spoke to, the military side of it and talking about his father. And, my dad wasn't in Vietnam like Jerry's, but, I was raised on a military base. It was frequently picketed by Greenpeace. My dad would go away for months at a time. And, there's times where you're a kid and your friends are getting pulled out to let them know that their dad's never coming back, right? And it really weighs on a 9-year-old. just the military lifestyle. And I can only imagine, that a lot of people learn late that their parents aren't gods or complete idiots by the time you turn it around as a teenager. But they're just people trying to hold their shit together and get you to adulthood. And you can really feel Jerry's journey to understand his father as part of this song, and just really see it take shape and work on that forgiveness for a past, that he can now understand as an adult. It was a really emotionally charged tune for me when you dig into the history of that. On a lighter note, Junkhead was my favorite individual lyrics on that, when he's like, "What's my drug of choice? Well, what have you got? I don't go broke and I do it a lot." I'm like, okay, this is clearly the high point, no pun intended, of his drug use arc in the storytelling, right? And it kind of tickled me, but
I think your pun was intended.
I think it was, actually. I just say not intended to try and cover me legally in case someone dies from over punning. But I have to agree with you. I really like the layering on the vocals. And honestly, going in, I thought it was just him dubbed over again. So the fact that you're saying that it is actually harmonizing blows my mind. Because Down in a Hole, amazing. Like, that stood out for me, the layering on that track and just pacing on the bass line on that. Sometimes when you have a band like Alice in Chains, where the guitar is so signature, where the vocals is just indistinguishable, where, other bands just are never going to be able to touch it, right? You always know who you're listening to. It's like AC/DC, right? The second you hear the guitar, the second you hear him singing, either lead singer, it's AC/DC, right? And I think they could have fallen into a trap where everything did sound the same and it had the same tone and the same pacing on this album, but they took careful steps to make sure that there was a real solid shift in the things that they could control, to avoid just having it sound like we've criticized other albums before for sounding just like 60 minutes of the same thing. And once you segue, what was the next song on the track?
After what? Junkman?
After Down in a Hole.
Oh, Down in a Hole. Sick Man.
Sick Man, that's right. It was much more up-tempo, drum heavy. It had like a Rob Zombie kind of feel to it in some ways, like layered over top of what they like to do. So really impressed with them being able to stay within their sound, but still be able to offer so many different changes. So that's the full run for me. I didn't get tired of it. I didn't listen to the whole album many times in a row though either, so I didn't notice that until now. I think it could probably grate to try and do the whole album all the time. And so I would probably agree that at some point you'd want to carve this up into a couple of your favorite tracks and mix it in with like REM Shiny Happy People or something like that to make sure, you got some self-care going on.
Now that's a mix.
I know, right? Exactly.
Bobby McFerrin to Alice in Chains.
Bam!
Nice.
And that's me. Back to you, Alan.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Yeah, I think I agree with a lot of the points you all made. I went in expecting to like this album more than I think I ended up actually liking it. As with you, I could not get through the whole thing in one go, partially because of the length and partially just because it starts to drone. It just starts to feel a little bit heavy and one-dimensional. Mind you, it's a really good dimension, but an hour of it nonstop is a little bit too much for me, I think. Incidentally, my favorite tracks on the album also trended towards the ones that were released as singles. And I didn't realize until afterwards that Down in a Hole and Them Bones were singles as well. The one standout track for me, though, is Sick Man, which I think it's one of the longer ones on the album, if not the longest. And it kind of takes you on a bit of a journey. I just like what they did musically. You could tell they were really experimenting with sounds and stuff. I was actually blown away by the musicality of these guys. I mean, they were playing with time signatures and It's not your standard 4/4 time all the time. As you guys touched on, the harmonization is just super cool. It's very unique to Alice in Chains, and I think that's one of the things that makes them really special. Also, Jerry Cantrell and the tone of his guitar is really standout for me. He kind of plays with a very bluesy style, and there's like a heavy use of the wah-wah pedal, but it's done in a way that's so unique to them, and I think it's really neat to listen to. But yeah, overall, I found it a bit tough, to listen to all of these songs back to back to back. It started to kind of wear me down a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. It was an interesting one. I think it's kind of cool. This might sound a little dark, actually, but for me, it was cool to hear the perspective of an addict from the mouth of an addict. Like, it kind of gives you almost a bit more empathy. Like, when you see addicts on the street, as I often do because I take public transit, it's easy for me to forget that these are human beings who've got stories that like led them to this point. And Dirt being kind of a almost like a concept album through the lens of addiction, like, yeah, it kind of did help me to feel a little bit more empathy for these guys. Also, incidentally, I couldn't help but notice that certain songs kind of had almost like a Soundgarden quality to them, which I guess makes sense. I mean, they were contemporaries within the Seattle music scene. I wouldn't call Alice in Chains necessarily grunge, but they kind of came up at the same time, and sonically there were a lot of ties to that. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a good album for sure, and yeah, I guess maybe we can jump into the ratings, and then I'll kind of leave you with my closing thoughts here. So I'll throw it back to Scott Coates just to get your scores.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Interesting everyone's perspectives here, and the harmonizations, now that you mentioned it, are pretty awesome, and I didn't really recognize that. And I like you saying an addict's life from an addict's point of view, right? It definitely has that. Look, while I didn't really enjoy the album, I'll give it a 4 for recommend, because it really does serve a point in musical history. Like, this was the beginning of the grunge era. Hard to believe that's 30 years ago, right? So these guys definitely set a sound at the very beginning of a movement. So I'll give it a 4 for recommend. Influence, I'm going to give it a 1. It's not going to spur me on to listen to more of them. I also, at the time, while I liked a couple of their singles, it didn't take me down any particular road. And overall, I'm just going to give it a 2. I'm sorry, but like I said, it just grinded on to me. It was a bit monotonous. Yeah, I couldn't make through in one go.
Yeah, I guess I'm up next. Yeah, a couple thoughts before I jump into my scores. One is one thing actually turned me on to this band early, and it was the Singles movie. And if you're a grunge fan and you've not seen that movie, highly recommend it. It's called Singles. Is it Matt Dillon?
Matt Dillon.
No, Matt.
And Pearl Jam's in it. 3 of the guys from Pearl
Dillon,
Jam.
thank you. Not Matt Damon.
Matt LeBlanc? Was it Matt LeBlanc?
Yeah, Matt Joey is in Singles. He was probably like 10 then or something, but early 90s movie, really good movie. And yeah, and I've heard some comparisons. I actually got Sabbath a bit. I thought that Cantrell's guitar at times kind of reminded me of Tommy Iommi's from Black Sabbath. There was like a little bit of similar, and somebody said Rob Zombie too, and I got that as well. So I think we're kind of on the same track here. I think it's one of those albums, and hindsight's 2020, and they were doing what they're doing. We're probably not their target demographic, white middle-aged guys. Well, maybe Alan and Scott are a bit younger, but the Scots, I'm just the old guy. But anyway, I think it's one of those albums that you cut 4 or 5 songs. I think it probably stands the time a bit better. I've heard that before when I was doing some research. There was a few articles and I listened to a podcast that actually said very similar, that they just thought like, hey, if you cut like 2 or 3 of the songs, maybe 4, that it probably would have stood up a bit better. I did listen to it with the latest in cannabis. Now it's really making a big impact in Canada. These resin-infused pre-rolls, and I tried one by Dab Bods. That's hard to say. Resin-infused pre-rolls, and that made it a little bit more enjoyable, I gotta say. But you can go dark if you just sit there alone in the darkness and you're super baked. Yeah, so be careful. Maybe use more of a sativa than an indica blend for that one, or you're just gonna like fire off into darkness. Anyway, yeah, really good musical album. I actually liked it in general, but again, I think it is just something you listen to a couple songs and get out. Recommend. I'm the same as Scott, a 4. I think it is one of those classic albums you should listen to. Just make it through it. Yeah, there's some kind of darker songs and some that probably won't jive with you personally, but it's worth a listen. Influence. I do this. I'm ranking a little bit because I know how influential of an album it was at the time, but it didn't really. Again, I remember it. I was in my early 20s, I guess 22, 23 when this came out. And I remember just kind of liking it. So I'm going to give it 3.5. And overall, I'm coming into 3.5. For me, it just wasn't like a really, really powerful album, but it has some really great tunes. And those 5 singles are amazing. A little dark at times, but really good. But anyway, what about you, Scott Gregory?
Yeah, I think when you're talking about Sabbath, it makes sense. When you look at Mike Inez joining the band later on, with him having done work for Ozzy as well too, right? So I didn't mention it, but I totally heard that in there as well too. Even though him joining, I think, was after this album was produced. Yeah, I mean, it's all been said. I don't have much of a wrap up on this. Would I recommend it? I'll give it a 4. Like Scott said, this is the birth of the grunge movement in many ways. This layer of the music coming out. I prefer Jar of Flies to this album. I just think for some reason they come out of the gate acoustically. Maybe it takes a little bit of that darker edge off of things and lightens up just enough to make it more palatable. So I'll give this one a 4 for recommend, but if you're only going to listen to one Alice in Chains album, then I would recommend Jar of Flies over this one. If you're going to listen to 2 albums, then you can listen to this one. Influence 3.5. It's throwing me back down a little bit of a hole. Listening to some Soundgardens. I listened to so much grunge when I was a kid, particularly Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots. So to just be thrown back on that track, it's great. I love it. And overall, I'm going to give this album a 4. I'm going to rate it pretty high. It's just great in every way. It's got tons of great lyrical work on it. It's very authentic. I mean, you're writing an album about drug use and then you eventually die of an overdose. You can't get much more street cred than that on an album of this nature. Party hard, die hard. So yeah, give it a listen. Exit scene.
Cool. Thanks, guys. I'm giving this a 5 out of 5 for influence for me. And the reason is because after I listened to Dirt a few times, I started to explore some of the newer stuff with William Duvall. And actually, Spotify just kind of started playing random stuff from the rest of their discography. And there were songs I had never heard before. And it turns out they were from some of their newer albums, featuring William Duvall on vocals. It turns out he really can do Lane Staley's legacy some justice. So I explored an album called The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, which is a hilarious album title. But a lot of their songs are really good, the newer stuff. So it influenced me to check out their new stuff. And actually, I would recommend everyone else does too. I think it really holds up, especially because Jerry Cantrell, being a mainstay in the band and contributing just about 50% of the vocals in terms of that harmonization. Like it really does sound like Alice in Chains, the OG lineup. So anyway, influenced me 5 out of 5 on that one. And it also influenced a lot of other people too. And so that brings me into my recommendation numbers. I'm giving it a 3.5. really cool to kind of, again, like get this perspective of addiction through the mouth of an addict. But again, it's dark, heavy subject matter for an hour. So it's not going to be everyone's bag, but if you do like 90s music, if you do like grunge, I do think this is one to check out. So 3.5 out of 5 on that one. And overall, I'm coming in at a pretty average 3.5 as well. I liked it. I was hoping I would like it more because I'm such a fan of grunge, but there was just, like Darren said, just a couple songs that needed to probably go away, and I think this album would have been a little bit more solid. Maybe a couple of faster, more upbeat tunes might have helped too. But cool. Well, thanks guys for jumping in and reviewing this album. Sounds like for the most part we enjoyed it, so that's cool. I think our next pick is coming to you courtesy of Scott Gregory.
Oui, c'est moi.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that, or are we going to leave our audience in the dark here?
No, I've decided. You may recognize her from her collaborations with Justin Timberlake and supergroup Lonely Planet, a little known artist called Lady Gaga. I've chosen her album Born This Way.
Never listened to the Gaga.
Interesting.
Nice.
Cool. Yeah, me neither.
Good pick.
All right. Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward
Gaga.
to that.
I've always been a Gaga fan, so I'm excited about this.
Are you
Totally.
Gaga over Gaga?
Yeah, a little bit. For somebody who started in pop, I always had a lot of respect for her, actually.
There you go.
Yeah. Awesome.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys. And thank you, our fair audience, for tuning in to yet another episode. Be sure to check back for Scott Gregory as he kind of goes into more details on why he's chosen to review Lady Gaga's album. And until next time, you can find us at thesonicollective.com and all of your favorite social networks.
Thanks for listening and exploring with us. We'll be back real soon with another pick and critique of albums that matter here at The Sonic Collective.